I wonder about how deeply divisive politics is. So I've heard a stat back in 2016, and I probably will misquote the stat, but I believe it said 80% of white evangelicals voted for Donald Trump, while 80% of non-white evangelicals voted against Donald Trump. So that sounds divisive politically. So my question to you all is, what is the divide? You know, like I would say most white evangelicals I know lean Republican. Maybe, I mean, that's changing nowadays with some different things happening in our nation. But I mean, is that true in the African American community? Would you say it's the church is predominantly Republican or Democrat?
Democrat. Yeah, it's clearly Democrat. There was a time when they leaned toward Republican, because the Republicans were quite different in terms of they catered to those who were poor and didn't have and whatnot. Over the period of number of years, they started to change. So then we find ourselves leaning toward the Democrat. Just being realistic about it, that's really the case. But we'll find out, and more I hang around Lonnie, and he and I, we got over some 20-some-odd years, and when I listen to him, it just makes a lot of sense, because there's good and bad on both sides. I didn't look at that until he brought it up one day. You know, he mentioned that, you know, everything about the Democrat is not right, and everything about the Republican is not right. So then we have, again, this is where the Lord comes in. What would Jesus want?
Right.
That has to be my guiding factor, not Democrat or Republican.
Right.
But what would Jesus approve of? And so
I told Joshua neither. I'm not on any political side. You know,
That's a great
Jericho
point.
and Jerusalem.
You know, because it's almost as if when Joshua is there looking at the angel, you know, of the Lord, and he's trying to force the angel of the Lord to choose a side, right?
That's right.
Are you for me and us, or our adversary, right? And that's what the same thing that the world's doing, right? Same things the world's doing. Are you Democrat or are you Republican? And, you know, the angel of the Lord, he said neither, no, right? He gives us the third option. It's kind of the foretaste of the goodness of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that third option can never be diminished. And I find myself enjoying that language of the third option, the gospel, the good news, for conversations that want to start horizontal and stay horizontal. We got to start vertical and then move to that horizontal place.
Good.
Okay. On the political side, I was sitting there thinking London was kind of speaking, but then that's a passage where God says, "Go ye therefore into the othermost parts of the world and teach them." And so the problem that we have with the tradition and the political side is there's nobody teaching the God way. And so there's another passage that says that there is no difference between a Jew and a Gentile. So that petition of division has to be destroyed. And whether it's Republican or whether it's a Democrat, it has to be God's way. Until you get to be God's way, we'll always have the indifference. And the traditional part is that we as a people, as a culture, race people, we're just emotional people.
Right.
But just because we're emotional and loud, that don't mean that the white or Caucasian, they're not right. You know, so it's got to go back to God. If it goes back to God, then some of the issues that we're dealing with, they're going to be suppressed.
Right.
But as long as you keep God out of it, the enemy, like Chris said, the enemy is going to use every avenue that he can do to keep us divided.
Right.
And that's that goes back to sin. You can't eliminate it. It's a sin issue.
Yeah.
It's not a black and white issue. Not a political issue. Republican, it's a sin issue.